himself.
He then started his own restaurant brewery business in an abandoned warehouse in the district of Denver. Working with a number of business people, he helped to create a dynamic new neighborhood that became a model of urban revitalization. Sorry. He ultimately opened 16 brew pubs, and we all know in today's world they're really successful. And they were almost in all of the historic districts. In 1997, you received the Award of Honor from the National Trust for Historic Preservation.
She's the first person who's ever put that in an introduction.
I need to tell you that means a lot to people from this community. We have 3 districts that are in the National Historic Register. And we are a Main Street, Iowa program. So as you look up and down on Main Street, we believe in preservation.
I can tell, I look up and down.
One of the things I was most impressed with is that he has served on over 40 boards and nonprofits, and that really is a true test of a leader. In 2003, he ran for mayor of Denver. He was successful, even though he was considered a dark horse, and he won by a landslide. And we all know what happened after that. He began to transform that city into a destination city and an economic hub. He eliminated a $70 million budget deficit, and heaven knows what happened with our new president and what our deficit is going to be. He instituted a number of police reforms, like establishing the Citizens Oversight Commission and an Office of Independent Monitoring. In 2005, with an approval rating of 92%, Time magazine rated him as one of the 5 best big city mayors in America. Congratulations. In 2010, he ran for the governorship. He became one of Denver mayor's most successful leaders, and in over 120 years won that governorship as the mayor of Denver. In the past 8 years, we know what has happened to Colorado's growth. They are one of the fastest growing economies in our nation. I think what's very important for those of us who believe in such a strong educational system, they are second in the nation for a qualified and educated workforce. And most important, 95% of their citizens have health care. So we welcome you to Mount Vernon.
That is the nicest introduction I think I can't remember better. No one has ever pointed out that in 1997 I won the Award of Honor from the National Trust for Historic Preservation, which I am proud of. Thank you all for coming. And Katie, is Katie here somewhere?
Yes, she is.
Thank you. I realize these things don't happen by accident, and somebody has to take the time and put in the effort to bring people together, so I deeply appreciate it. But I appreciate all of you taking time out on your Saturday. I'll start. I mean, I'm running for president because I think this country is facing a national crisis of division. And there's no two ways to look at it, but we have not been this divided, I don't think, since the Civil War. And it's keeping us from addressing serious, national challenges. You look at it, it's not just getting coverage for healthcare. It's the inflation, right? For the last 35 years, the inflation in healthcare has been generally double what the normal CPI is. Our division right now is keeping us from addressing climate change. And we were within 10 or 12 years of really getting into feedback loops and irreversible damage. We can't even address some of the looming challenges of automation and artificial intelligence and what that's going to do. Right? We've got to get ahead of each one of these things, and we are so divided we can't do it. Now, let me say, I understand what Donald Trump has done in this country. I am very clear that he's not only attacked every institution, he has gone and authorized the agents of the United States to remove children from the arms of their parents and put them up for adoption. Right? Where we come from, I call that kidnapping. I mean, we are sanctioning our government to be involved in that. And now, most recently, and I can't believe the media doesn't make more of this yet. When the Mueller report came out, the one thing that was clear that everyone agreed to was that the Trump campaign did give their polling information and exchange information with a hostile foreign power of the United States. No one's arguing about that. We accept that. Now, we'll see whether, the obstruction of justice and how that legal stuff turns out. But Donald Trump is putting, I think, we all think that the world we know and democracy is going to last forever. But I think he's putting it at risk. I think that's a legitimate argument. But I will argue that Donald Trump is not the disease. He's the symptom. And the disease is the level of division that we've had all this time. And I'm running for president because I think, I looked at all the other candidates. I never thought I'd run for president my whole life. And all these candidates are mostly, not all, but mostly from Washington. And they're blaming each other. Everything's partisan. I think we've got to defeat Donald Trump. That's the highest priority. We've got to beat Trump. But I think I can bring people together on the other side. As Mert mentioned, came out to Colorado as a geologist. I want to go back further than that. I'll give you just a little context. I grew up outside Philadelphia, and my mother was a child of the Depression. She family lost almost everything in the Depression, so she never bought a dress. She'd sew everything. My mother, and she was almost 5 foot. She claimed she was 5 foot, but she wasn't. But everyone called her Shrimpy her whole life, and she would not only buy the fabric and make her own clothes, but she would wash tin foil and tape it to the refrigerator door so that we could reuse it multiple times. I am not making this up. This is just how the house in which I grew up in. And she was also had bad luck for a period in her life. She was widowed twice before she was 40. Her first husband died at the end of World War II. He'd been a fighter pilot. Her second husband was my dad. He got cancer, intestinal cancer, before they really knew how to deal with it. So before she was 40, she was widowed twice, but she never once complained. And she was someone who, what she would tell us is you cannot control what life throws at you, but you can control how you respond, whether it makes you better or worse, whether it makes you stronger or weaker. And, I grew up, when I came out to Colorado, I thought I'd be a geologist my whole life. But again, those commodity prices, and you guys remember the 80s, the whole industry was upside down. Over 10,000 geologists got laid off all over the country. So there was no jobs. I lost, just like a lot of the steel workers and automotive workers in the 1980s and the 90s, I lost my job and my profession. And I was out of work for, including the time it took to raise the money to build the brew pub, I was out of work for almost 2 years. And I can tell you, you've been out of work 6 or 8 months, you see a different person in the mirror from who you're used to seeing. And it does take away some of your confidence and some of your normal resilience. I was lucky I had a couple of friends, and we did start opening this brew pub. The rent was $1 per square foot per year. My own mother wouldn't invest. She kept saying, by this time she had enough, she could have invested $5 grand. She kept saying, who wants to have dinner in a brewery, right? I said, Mom, it's like a bakery, it's fresh. Fresh beer is better. We finally got the thing open, and I went out to the other restaurant owners who had been feuding and competitive and didn't get along. And I said, at $1 a square foot per year, this is a pretty abandoned area. We need to be working together. And so within a few months, we were buying coffee cups together, we were buying pint glasses together. We actually went, and I got everybody to chip in. We bought newspaper ads in the Denver Post about, we were in a part of Denver called Lower Downtown. We all agreed we were going to change the name and call it Lodo, kind of like they call it Soho in New York. We thought we were pretty smart at the time, but it began to work. And the business finally started after about 4 or 5 years. Like most entrepreneurs, I worked 70 and 80 hours a week for those first 5 or 6 years. Well, probably the first 10 years. But when it took off, we started going around the Midwest, and as Bert said, I ended up opening 16 brew pubs, mostly in the Midwest, almost all in historic buildings in downtown that had been somehow abandoned, and tried to build that community that we created in Denver. I kept my foothold in Denver, and I served on, I think it was 22 different nonprofits, but you include all the committees. It was 42 nonprofit boards and committees in that 15 years before I ran for mayor. And I'm not sure how they talked me into run for mayor. I just got frustrated by what I call the fundamental nonsense of government. The mayor, when we were in a recession in 2001, and the city needed revenues, they doubled the price of parking meters. And when you're in a recession, your revenues are going down. It's not when you raise prices. It's the opposite. And anyway, I had never run for student council in my entire life. I think I'm the only person running for president that can say that. I never ran for class president. I don't want to insult anybody who's here, but I didn't hang out with the people that did. I won't get into that. I was trying to figure out who the heck I was when I was in high school. I was a late bloomer, is what my mother would always say. She'd pat me on the back and say, "Don't worry, you're just a late bloomer." Anyway, I ran for mayor, saying I would not do any negative ads. I wouldn't attack my opponents, because that's a great way, politicians, you attack the other guy. That's how you get on TV. That's how you get a newspaper. But it tears people apart. So after the election, you can't get people together again. So I had 2 campaigns as mayor, 2 campaigns as governor. I've never done an attack ad, never attacked my opponents. Painted a positive vision, and the vision in Denver, Denver was 20% of the whole metropolitan area. There are another 33 metropolitan, municipalities there, and they hated each other. And I said, the days of Denver being successful without the suburbs is crazy. We're going to work together. We'll even share some of our sacred senior water rights, which is, as you know, in the West is a pretty precious thing to share. They said, "You're crazy. No Denverite's going to vote for you sharing our most sacred treasures with the suburbs who we hate." Turns out the suburbs don't hate the city, and the city doesn't hate the suburbs. It was the politicians, really. It was the folks who needed enemies. I won. It was an open seat, and Denver's a strong mayor form of government, and I ran against 7 lifetime talented, public servants, and they've all become friends of mine ever since. I got 65% of the vote, and that was, the people of Denver said, "Of course we want to work together." And then I went out and talked to the mayors. I in the end, it took a while, but we decided we were going to build a transit system, right? So we had terrible, terrible traffic. And so we created fast tracks, 122 miles of new track. I got all 34 mayors, 21 of them Republicans, to sign to support a tax increase to build this transit initiative. So we had everybody on the same page. You fly into Denver now, you fly into DIA, you take a train down to Union Station, you're in the midst of my old neighborhood, and you'll see one of the greatest national models of urban revitalization there is. And I took that success, and then I said, "All right, I'm going to run for governor. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to lift everyone up. I'm going to cut red tape and regulation. I'm going to get more access to capital. We're going to be the most progressive state, but with the highest environmental standards, the highest ethical standards. But we're not going to leave anyone behind. We're not going to leave rural Colorado behind." And everyone kind of looked at me and said, "Well, you're never going to get elected because the suburbs aren't going to vote for you," to say stuff like that. Well, I won by 13 points, and we went out and when I got elected, we were 40th in job creation. For the last 2 years, according to U.S. News and World Report, we're the #1 economy in America. And for 2018, I believe we'll be either first or second, but I think we'll be the #1 rural economy. We'll be the first state, in 2020, we'll be the first state to have every municipality with broadband. So we'll have connected the entire state. We provided a tax break, so any entrepreneur starts a business in a small town or rural part of the state, they pay no taxes of any kind to the state for 4 years, nor do their employees pay any taxes to the state. Now, it's not expensive because we haven't been able to get too many people to do it, but so we've created about 1,000 jobs. But if you're in a town with 1,500 or 2,000 citizens and suddenly there's a new business with 25 workers, it matters. People care. It shows the rest of that community that people care and that they're going to make an effort. We also went out and we got the oil and gas industry to sit down. You guys know methane. Methane is 40 times worse than CO2 in terms of climate change. Methane is about one of the worst pollutants there is. But no one had been talking about it. But the oil and gas companies and the utilities were venting it, flaring it. We got the oil and gas people to sit down with the environmental community and create the first methane regulations in the country. It's the equivalent of taking 320,000 cars a year off the roads, and we got the oil and gas industry to pay for it. But just by getting them to sit down together in the same room, let me tell you, they hate each other. The oil and gas industry and the environmentalists don't trust each other. They've been at odds all these years. But once they actually started working together and got a little trust, they created something never been created before. Now it's being rolled out as national policy in Canada. Next fall it'll be rolled out as national policy in Mexico. And ultimately we'll get it national policy in the world because it is the single most focused thing we can do to combat climate change there is. I say all this just because I feel like that ability to bring people together and get stuff done, not to point fingers and blame and give fancy speeches, but create teams, whether as a mayor or as a governor or as the CEO of a big restaurant, or not big, not in today's terms, but a large restaurant company. I think that's what the country needs, and that's how to beat Trump. If we're going to beat Trump in Ohio and Michigan and Pennsylvania and North Carolina and Iowa, I think we've got to be pragmatic about it. One thing I've used to make sure, well, one way I've succeeded is I have not, once the election's over, I hire Republicans, Democrats, everybody, if they want to be part of the solution, they're on board. I don't denigrate and demonize business. If we're really going to get solutions to climate change and healthcare inflation and automation, it's going to take everybody at the table completely. It's building partnerships between business and government and nonprofits. I mean, that is the way you get meaningful change that will last. So, I mean, that's my pitch. I realize my wife refers to me as, I think the New York Times called me the dark horse from the Rockies. My wife, she's now started calling me that around the house. She says she thinks it's sexy. I prefer to think that, that I'm not that dark a horse. That I've got more of a chance. My challenge is really to go out and make sure people understand that the President of America, the President of the United States, is not just about, how well you can speak for your values, but it's also about whether you can put a team together and actually get stuff done. And I have to raise a bunch of money, I know that. Hopefully you'll all go home and write get online, get $5,000 for $5,000. $5,000 would be illegal. It's been a long day. But small donors is one way, and then building those networks is a big part of it. Anyway, some people come to me and say, oh my gosh, I think it's impossible. You're never going to get everyone together like you did in Denver. It's too divided. And let me tell you that the Republican mayors and the Democratic mayors hated each other in Denver. But we're all humans. And it can be done, we just have to work harder. It's sort of like when I was running for mayor of Denver, I was the darkest of dark horses, and I used to carry a clipping from the Denver Post to inspire my young volunteers. Because they get disheartened. I stayed at like 3 or 4% of the polls for 7 weeks, 8 weeks. And this clipping was about a professor of public speaking at the University of Wyoming up in Laramie about the importance of using opposites when you speak publicly. If you're going to say the worst of times, you say the best of times. If you're going to use the term, the agony, talk about the ecstasy, but put it close together to create emotional impact. She asked her class, what's the opposite of despair? The kid raises her hand and goes, joy? She goes, exactly. You want people to really feel despair. Put joy in the same sentence. They create emotion by being close together. Then she says, what's the opposite of woe? And the kid way in the back goes, giddy up! And this gets back to my mother, because one of her big things was you don't quit. No matter what happens, I mean, you can't control what comes, but you can can't control how you respond, and just never give up. And I think that's what this country has to do, right? It's a funny joke, but in most of life's situations, the opposite of hard times, the opposite of woe, is working hard. And my commitment, I know I can beat Trump. And I think I can also bring us together on the other side and get us to link arms and go shoulder to shoulder and start addressing some of these really big challenges. So thank you all for being here. And together I look forward to giddy up. Questions? Yes?
Yeah, so, I know I am a mother and I watch live tests.
That's great.
Because I'm concerned about climate and the environment. And being in Iowa, we do a pretty good job, I think, with turbines and
You bet.
wind energy.
Number 2 in the country.
Very good. So what plans do you have to support renewable sources, particularly wind and solar?
Perfect, great question. So the question, how do we support renewables? And I'll give you the quick, the 5-point plan that I think goes beyond what most of the other candidates have been talking about. I mean, first you got to get to renewables in electrical generation. That's one of the 5 big challenges we have is electrical generation. And Colorado, we have 2 coal plants. We're in the process of closing, and for the first time, we're going to replace that coal with wind, solar, and batteries. Right? No natural gas. It'll be the first time, and replace wind. Use the wind and the solar to replace the coal, and the average monthly electric bill is going to go down for the consumers. That's never been done. Second, we have to get vehicles, electric vehicles in the next 5 years. They're going to, everything okay? But electric vehicles, we need to put together a network of recharging stations. They're not that expensive. There are a lot of different ways we can finance it and monetize it, but we got to get out ahead of it before the vehicles come here. We have to make the capital investments because it's going to be changing transportation is the next big thing we do after electrical generation. We get the electrical generation transformed, then we use more of that electricity to making sure that we have a clean vehicle. The third thing is retrofitting our homes, retrofitting our public building. This pays for itself. And the federal government, and we've got a plan to do this, will be able to monetize and set that up so people can get the capital up front and then pay back that capital investment in the savings they'll get from lower electric bills, lower utilities. The last 2 things, and this is key, we don't have a solution for heavy industry yet. In other words, there are a lot of issues around the exhalation of concrete. Right? Concrete's calcium carbonate, gives off a lot of CO2 when it cures. That curing is one of the largest sources of CO2 in the world. So if you were to rank, thank you guys, thanks for coming. Thank you. Yeah, that's all right. I vote often. If you were to rank CO2 pollutants, the largest polluter with CO2 is China. And then us, because we have so much energy use, we're the second. The third would be concrete. So we don't have an innovation yet. We have not figured out how to control those carbon emissions from the curing of concrete. But we can. So I think the federal government, the next president, I would go in there and say, we're going to increase by $20 billion a year, which sounds like a lot of money, but in research it's not too much. And go in there and say, all right, we're going to focus on the National Renewable Energy Laboratory and all these other federal research labs and all the private universities and the public universities and figure out how we fix that. And then the same thing also, agriculture in all its forms also has a lot of CO2 and methane that comes out. And we'll figure out ways to fix that. We don't know yet. We don't have those innovations, but it's because we haven't looked. And we'll find that out. But I have, I've got a master's in geology. I've studied the issues around climate change and the acidity of the oceans. I mean, you look at these feedback loops. If we don't get on it in the next 12 years, we will be dooming our children and even our grandchildren to consequences that we don't fully understand even today. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier the ballooning national debt. With that being such an overwhelming issue to tackle, how do you think we can start to chip away at that?
Sure. Well, the first thing, when you're in a hole, put down the shovel. So no more promising we're going to pay for everything, we're going to take care of everything. we're going to start balancing the budget. As a mayor, we balance the budget every time. As a governor, every year you balance the budget. We don't get to print money. As a CEO, when you're running a restaurant, you've got only so much money you can spend. So how do we find ways to save money and yet deliver progressive change? You know, one of the things, and we can take the college debt that's out there, almost $1.5 trillion. We can take that, and there's no reason why we can't have the federal government refinance that at 2.5%. So that helps. But there's a bigger problem long term is the cost of college. And you know, you've got a college here. You've got to figure out how to control the inflation on colleges first. And then second, recognize that 70% of our kids are never going to get a 4-year college degree. That's been true for 30 years. And we pulled back a lot of our support for vocational training and all the skills that we're going to need for these new professions that are going to emerge. Right now, this is a month-old information in the Department of Labor. There are 7.2 million job openings and only 6.3 million people looking. I've never heard of it being like that. And the big problem is we don't have the skills, training. So, and I guarantee you over the next 15 or 20 years, they're suggesting that 20 to 30% of the workers of America are going to lose their professions. We've got to get out ahead of that. So 5 years before they're in danger of losing their jobs, we don't have to scare anybody, but just, again, we have the technology now to go out and say to different industries and different workers, here are the skills you've got, and we're working with Microsoft and LinkedIn to create an ability, a tech platform to create profiles for every person to keep track of the skills they acquire. And that will also allow us to go out there 5 years out and say, it looks like your profession might be challenged in the next 5 years. Maybe here are the skills that you have. Here's some other professions. Pick one of these other professions, and we'll tell you what skills you've got that are useful, what skills you're missing, where you can get those skills, and we'll make sure they're free. And you might have to go to school a couple nights a week, but at least you'll have choices. And that's, I think when you promise people choices, that motivates people, that they'll be willing to put in those 2 nights, because then they'll recognize they don't want to be left behind or have the economy leave them behind. The great thing about most, you put in that skills, the time to get those skills, most of you are going to get better paid jobs. You're going to get jobs with good benefits. So that kind of thing doesn't have, we can do that without any additional money, right? We can work with community colleges, and every business I know is dying to help fund community colleges if they can get workers with the skills that they need. That's all people are looking for. So this is a way to do something that changes the landscape of things without actually having to put on national debt. I think if we could restrain the additional borrowing, I think, and I'm a big believer in growth, right? We've got to make sure that everyone gets to share in economic growth. But as we grow, we can grow ourselves out of debt. And that's what, essentially, that's what we did in World War II. We borrowed to the hilt, we did the GI Bill, we did the Marshall Plan, we did all the interstates, we borrowed all this money, and then we stopped borrowing, and we actually worked our way out of debt. We grew. Our economy grows. What else? You notice that question was really about the national debt, but I worked in all that stuff. Just want you to know this is not my first rodeo. Yeah.
I'm Meredith, and I'm an ACLU Rights for All voter. I believe that no citizen of the United States should lose their right to vote. In Maine and Vermont, voting is such a basic civil right that they do not lose it even if they are sentenced to prison. Do you think the rest of the country should follow Maine and Vermont's example?
So I believe that felons, when they paid their debt to society, should be able to vote. I have no question. I think when people are in prison, you forfeit your freedom, and I don't think you get to vote. Now, I realize that ruffles feathers, but there's got to be consequences when people break the law. And even if we disagree with the laws, and that's, we legalized marijuana. I hear you, and the soup was hot. You repeat back the words, people feel validated, and when someone's angry at you, most of us kind of shrink back anyway. When you repeat back someone's words, you open up and hear the words in a different way. And I think once people begin to hear each other, there is the beginnings of trust. And that's what we did with the oil and gas industry and the environmentalists. Part of my job was to keep them in the room and get them to hear each other so they wouldn't walk out. That's part of what I did with the Republican mayors and the Democratic mayors. If you repeat back, you find the ways that people hear each other. Now, my wife said to me last week, She said, well, sweetheart, isn't that a lot like couples therapy? Which, just for the record, we have never been in couples therapy. There's nothing wrong with couples therapy. I'm just saying, I'll put that in shuffle. I think but I do think that listening is the key, and it sounds like such a cliche, but you have to take the time and put in that effort to build a relationship with somebody. I tell all my staff when we're trying to get to these unusual accomplishments and bring people together and get stuff done, that it all comes from collaboration, and we collaborate at the speed of trust. That's the critical ingredient. You've got to have at least some little bit of trust to get to the point where you can collaborate. Yeah?
So I was interested to hear you say that if you break the law, there should be consequences. For years now, the Israelis have illegally occupied Palestinian territory. They have created settlements that are illegal, and I very often see pictures of Israeli soldiers shooting little children, and journalists and healthcare professionals. And I wonder what consequences would you visit on the Netanyahu government for continuing and expanding those practices?
Sure. Well, let me frame this. You're asking a question about international affairs and diplomacy. And certainly, I mean, I'll start with a larger point of view. I don't think there's anything the president does that's more important than take on the responsibility and the role as commander-in-chief. And I can tell you, first, the one thing I wouldn't do is ignore and denigrate the advice of the world's most experienced intelligence officers, military officers, diplomatic officers. The second thing I wouldn't do would be to attack and dismiss our closest allies. And I always think of NATO as our kind of friends for life. They are generally open markets. They have rule by law. They're generally democracies of different maybe than we are in some ways, but they're still democracies. They are our closest allies. And what I think of as the greatest generation, at the end of World War II, when they created NATO, originally as a strategic security alliance. We now have like 27 of them. Originally it was just for security, but it became part of how we trade and part of how we work together. And I mean, the first thing I do when I got elected, we were just talking about this a minute ago, I mean, we have 1,000 empty desks in the State Department, but their jobs are unfilled. President Trump has said he basically doesn't trust diplomats, doesn't trust the military intelligence. I view that as reckless and unbelievably increasing the dangers that we might actually get to some sort of a serious war. And it's almost like he doesn't really believe that could happen, so he doesn't have to worry about it. But when they created NATO and the sequence that led to all those strategic alliances, it was premised on the fact that a world war is something we don't ever want to get. And sometimes reading the newspapers it doesn't feel like it, but we're at one of the longest extended, generally speaking, in terms of a global perception or a global reality, a larger period of peacetime. Now, in terms of China, first thing I'll say, China was cheating on its agreements, we know that. China was stealing intellectual property, but you don't begin a trade war. I mean, you start getting into escalating tariffs. Every example I've been able to find is both sides suffer from it. It's often the last thing you do before you go to war. We need to get our trade agreements renegotiated. They weren't fair. NAFTA hadn't been changed in 25 years, but you don't go immediately to trade wars. Now, back to Jerusalem and Israel. So that's my overall framing. Within that context, I don't think we go in and tell Israel, you can't do this or you can't do that. I'm certainly no fan of Prime Minister Netanyahu. When he continues to annex parts of the West Bank, he makes a two-state solution harder. And I know that there are a number of people in Israel now that feel that a one-state solution, there's a way to do that. I'm not clear on exactly how that's going to work. And I'm open to it, and I think the parties involved have to find that solution. But I do still believe that Israel is one of our oldest and longest and strongest allies in that part of the world. And they are an open market, they're a democracy. They're working through their own strategic issues. I'm not going to turn my back on Israel. Yeah.
So I know that you legalized marijuana in Colorado. What steps did you take to get nonviolent drug offenders out of prison, and what would you do nationally if you legalized nationally?
Great. I knew there'd be a pot question sooner or later. So first, what we did was anybody who had a nonviolent marijuana offense or anything connected in that sense, we gave them a card. They had to come, fill out a report. Went into the prisons. Anyone who was in there for marijuana for possession of any kind, we pardoned them and let them go. In terms of what would I do as president, and this is an interesting question because right now, each state that legalizes marijuana is in conflict with the federal law. Even if you just have medical marijuana, your banks that allow that business to have a charge card or write checks could lose their bank charter because marijuana is still it's considered a class 1, a Schedule 1 narcotic. We've got to get taken off that Schedule 1 so we can do testing on it, figure out what are the real medical effects, treat it like any other drug. The FDA should be able to talk about what types of autism, what kinds of seizures, where is it most effective for people. Second, we should allow banks in those states, in those states where they have legalized marijuana, they should be able to have banking. States are the laboratories of democracy. This is something that, and again, I was against it when we were first having the vote on legalizing marijuana. I was worried about a spike in teenage consumption, high THC marijuana, that your brain's rapidly growing, and when you're a teenager, all the brain scientists tell me there's a high probability you'll lose a sliver of your long-term memory if you start using this high THC marijuana. We haven't seen that in Colorado. We were also worried about driving while high. We haven't seen that either. Actually, the only demographic where we saw an increase in consumption, senior citizens. That's just the facts. We do a survey of 24,000 people, a public health survey, every 2 years. So that's just the state of Colorado. So those are good statistics. We haven't seen a spike. I tell the other governors for a long time, I said, wait a few years, let's get more data. Now I said, if your voters want it, if they're ready, you should legalize it. So then the federal government should take it off as a Schedule 1 narcotic, make sure they can bank it. We should have the Department of Agriculture address what kind of pesticides work and don't work. This is something that gets burned, so some combination of the rules we have for tobacco, but also looking at other types of plants that are used for pharmaceutical products. We've got to make sure that we handle it safely. And then, this is one part that you're probably going to disagree. I don't think the federal government should go tell Alabama or tell Maine that they should legalize it. In other words, I think each state should make their own decision whether they want medical or recreational, whether they want to legalize it. But the federal government should get out of their way and do everything they can to make sure that those states do make that decision, that they can do it safely and legally. Thanks for your question. Yeah.
So as we all know, agriculture and crop farming are very important here in Iowa. So a question that I have for you is, going forward, what might some of your policies be to specifically help support smaller family and perhaps organic farms,
Sure.
As well as to hold larger agricultural business corporations accountable for environmental impact?
Absolutely. And again, thank you. One of the guys who, since I first started talking, and I really didn't ever think I thought Hillary Clinton would be the president. I thought I'd finish my last 2 years as governor and I was going to go back into business. I'm honest when I say I saw, I just didn't see anyone else who's run stuff and gotten stuff done in the cabinet. So, but one of the first people I talked to was a guy named Gary Hirshberg. Gary Hirshberg started Stonyfield Yogurt in New Hampshire. He's the largest employer, he's the largest political bundler, he's a zealot for this stuff. And I've gone every summer. I grew up outside Philadelphia, so every summer of my adult year I've gone, spent a week or two on this lake in New Hampshire called Swan Lake. He's our next door neighbor. He's not next door. So I've known him from the beginning, and he's just a remarkable guy. We spend a bunch of time. There's also a guy named Walter Robb who supported me, who was the co-CEO of Whole Foods. And a lot of this is systems of how we begin making sure that small farmers can get to the markets where they can get their best price. And I think it's increasingly clear that just like the craft beer movement, right? When I opened the wine group, we were the 10th brew pub in America, right? I never thought we'd get to 20 brew pubs. Now there's 5,300. It's like, holy smokes. But craft beer, people pay a little more for a quality product because they can perceive it. More and more people feel that way, and especially about food. So really it's restructuring the system and maybe providing some tax breaks and some incentives, but I don't think they have to be much. I mean, the questions about the national debt, we can't just go promising a tax break here or a tax break there. We've got to be pretty frugal. But a lot of this is just creating systems of distribution and making sure that people can get, if you're going to put the time and effort into growing, let's say heirloom types of tomatoes. I mean, how many of you guys get sick of those leather tomatoes that now you have to get a skill saw to come through the out of them? What happened to the tomato that was so fragile you could bruise it and it had so much flavor, right? Somebody's going to start growing those. So far in Colorado, I test every tomato, and I call it my tomato test of produce. And there's only a couple that are getting close to where they used to be. But I think that's something we should these are all things that are going to create lots of jobs. There are no machines that are going to harvest tomatoes. No machines that can harvest most of our fruits and our vegetables. And I think that's a good thing. It makes it hard because it's hard for you to find workers these days. If someone's on even a small organic farm, you've got to be really wise about what you grow and how you're gonna get the work done. Because it's the labor situation. The same thing as I talked about, 7.2 million job openings, only 6.3 million people looking. It's competitive. One more question. All right, two more questions. I'll let you I'll be quick.
I'm a returned Peace Corps volunteer, and I'm curious what your plan would be to grow the Peace Corps program. Before he was assassinated, Kennedy wanted to have 100,000 Peace Corps volunteers a year go abroad and serve, and they're not even up to 10,000 at the most.
Well, it's a budget issue, right? We have to find out. Most successful enterprises have an alignment of self-interest, and I think we can begin that. I mean, usually when I think about expanding the Peace Corps, I look at also pushing mandatory public service, and not mandatory, but putting incentives in there so that everybody spends a couple of years doing some sort of service. Because those who've been in the Peace Corps or those who've been in the military, in a funny way, going to college is the same thing. You create barracks room friendships that go with you your whole life. And I think whether that's in the Peace Corps or whether that's going, I dropped out after my freshman year of college. And I worked for something my mother got me, and we're not Quakers, but she was friends with a woman who ran the American Friends Service Committee. So we went up and worked on turning an old sardine factory on the northern coast of Maine, up by Eastport, Maine, turned this old sardine factory into an alternative school. There are 13 of us that spent 4 months up there over the course of the summer doing the work, and then a bunch of us stayed and were teaching assistants in the school. Those are friends for life, and that relationship, that experience changed my life. We've got to figure out ways to do that for everybody, but it's got to be financed, and I think that we've got to figure out how to get the business community to realize that these are going to make better workers, better people.
Well, I'm a returned Peace Corps volunteer, and I don't know this. I know you've done research on Iowa. You know we don't have a fracking industry because we don't have any shale. I don't know how much you know about sand that goes to the fracking industry. It's produced in only 3 counties in Iowa. They turn out to be the most beautiful counties we have. And to get the sand, you just knock down these pretty little hills. Most of it's going, maybe it's in Wisconsin. We've stopped it in Iowa, and it's going to the Bakken or it's going to the Eagle Ford, and I don't know if it's going out to Colorado. But at some point, we have to stop doing fracking. I liked your answer on getting the methane out, but when are we going to stop expanding fracking, either in Colorado or in
Sure. So, and fracking is part and parcel, as my grandfather would say, to extracting hydrocarbons. You can't get oil and gas without fracking, and without fracking, you can't get oil and gas. the challenge, the way we get rid of it is stop needing oil and gas. And that's everything I said. That's getting rapid recharging stations for electric vehicles. It's accelerating the transition from, coal plants to electrical, renewable energy driven plants. It's going to our homes and refurbishing and retrofitting our commercial buildings, our municipal and government buildings and our homes. I mean, all that stuff is consuming energy. People are going to drive wherever, and they're going to use gasoline and oil, and until we can replace that, it's going to be hard to stop fracking. How do you stop the sand? That's local communities just saying, we don't want to use this as a landscape, it's valuable to us. Right, and I think that works. And what that does is it'll drive up the price of sand, and eventually they won't be able to frack. And that's a perfectly legitimate thing. I've had a hard time while I was governor. People in Boulder County, Boulder's very liberal. You got Boulder County and then Weld County. Weld County's very conservative, and all they want to do is drill more. Boulder County doesn't want any drill, they don't want any frack. But when you tell someone that you're not going to frack anymore, that means that the mineral rights, whatever, are worthless. So government, basically by banning fracking, you're taking away someone's mineral rights. In Colorado, those are mostly owned by retired couples. Most of them out in the Eastern Plains, they've owned them for a long time. I offered it as a state, I said, if Boulder wants to ban a sliver of fracking or drilling around their cities, the state will pay half the, we're not China, we're not Russia. We have eminent domain. You want to take private property away from someone or take the value away, we should pay something for it. But I couldn't get them to pay for it. So that we always are in this tense, this difficult relationship. I got a lot of grief. I'm going to get in trouble just for telling this story. But I was trying to get in fracking fluid. They wouldn't reveal what the components were. I said that's intolerable. You're creating suspicion and fear. This fracking is going on, and people are, they're scared. So I had a CEO of one of the big, larger exploration companies. And I told him he had a social contract, he should reveal this. And with it, he had this guy from Halliburton. And they had a prototype, just a test of a fracking fluid that was made with all FDA-approved components. So Food and Drug Administration approved. So it's like glycerin, it's all the things that are in every food product, or so many food products. So it was this it was about the consistency of motor oil, except it was totally transparent. And I said, well, that's it. And he said, no, this is all FDA approved. You could drink this. And I looked at him and I said, you could drink this. And then he looked at me and he says, sure, I'll drink it. And he picked it up, he opened it, he took a swig. He pushed it over towards me. And that was where I had a decision of whether I'm going to be in battle with this guy. And he's not going to, she clearly didn't trust me. He thought I was most geologists start out as environmentalists. That's why we go into geology, so we can go off and, I did my master's research north of Yellowstone Park. I got to spend 2 summers in the most beautiful country in the world. Anyway, he didn't trust me at all. And I took a drink right there. And that afternoon, we got him to agree to revealing components. A month later, he agreed, he was the leader that agreed to go ahead and let's go and discuss methane. No other executive of a large oil company was ever willing to do that. And that's my point, is that sometimes you've got to be pragmatic in these relationships. Now, in terms of protecting sand and cutting back fracking, the way you protect sand in your local communities, but the way to cut back on fracking is to get rid of the need of hydrocarbons. And I would argue we've done more on a per capita basis in Colorado than any state in America, both through methane, through renewable energy, and through electric vehicles. Next to California, we have the highest percentage of electric vehicles. The best way to get rid of fracking is to get rid of hydrocarbons. All right, thank you.